counts. Check this out. First, Christian copyists were conservative in transmitting texts. They were careful. And in all of Josephus' voluminous writings, we're talking 80,000 lines here, there is no strong suspicion of scribal tampering anywhere. So to have created this Testimonium Flavianum out of whole cloth would have been an unparalleled act of scribal audacity. It wouldn't have happened, okay? If Christians had written the paragraph from scratch, they might have been expected as well to give Jesus a little more face time, you know? Like, let's hoop it up, you know what I'm saying? But John the Baptist gets more. And so the language isn't even all that emphatically Christian. You've got just that one paragraph. Why didn't they add more? But the Testimonium Flavianum looks kind of more like a qualification of an existing statement than a free creation, okay? Third point that Mason makes is that if some of the vocabulary and phrasing sound peculiar, like not exactly Josephus, while this is true, the rest is perfectly normal and typical, actually, of Josephus. Key phrases in the Testimonium Flavianum are Josephine completely through. They're not New Testament era. You don't see them in other Christian literature. One of them is wise man, another is astonishing deeds, and another is tribe. Geza Vermesh talks about this, and I think she kind of hits a home run. She says, the Testimonium Flavianum, when it mentions wise man and performer of astonishing deeds, it's unlikely to be Christian fabrication because Jesus as wise man has no New Testament roots. It would have been meaningless for somebody to make it up. It's not in the Bible about Jesus. But wise man is used by Josephus for Solomon and Daniel. The second phrase, astonishing deeds, which is paradoxa erga, this description isn't in the New Testament, okay? But Josephus does use it for the Jewish race, national, communal groups. Interesting. In fact, I want to rewind there in that he uses tribe, phylon of national and communal groups. Paradoxa erga, which means astonishing deeds, is actually about the miracles of Elisha, and he refers to that as well. The point is that the passage here we're looking at, it's a tantalizing mixture of clearly Christian affirmations with phrases and ideas typical of Josephus as well. That's R.T. France from the Evidence for Jesus. So these above points have led many scholars to think that Josephus must have said something about Jesus, even if it's not what we currently have. Moreover, and I think this is pretty crazy, and I don't think it's cool that Mr. Armstrong ignored this in his first video on Josephus. There's a later reference in James, to James in Antiquities 2200, and it seems to presuppose an earlier reference to Jesus. Feldman, the scholar, declares, the quotation about James, the brother of Jesus, is considered authentic in its entirety by almost all scholars. So Josephus, by almost all scholars, is said, hey, he did refer to Jesus. And all we're arguing about here is the Testimonium Flavianum, which has incredible support. All right, if you feel you need to keep listening to this video, and I hope you do because our song's hilarious, listen to this. Josephus actually is referenced outside the Greek Christian tradition by an Arabic Christian in the 10th century. Couldn't have passed through the Greek Christian hands, you know, from the 10th century to the 16th century. And there's a scholar named David Flusser who's like beloved. And this is what he has to say about it. He says this. He says, I believe that a form of this witness about Jesus by Josephus did exist and has been discovered by Shlomo Pines. Flusser has the Israel Prize in Literature from 1980. He's like a rock star in Israel, and he's got that to say about Shlomo Pines. Listen to what Shlomo Pines says. I got Shlomo Pines' book. It's right here. Why would a guy like Armstrong ignore Pines? Why do scholars sometimes ignore key resources like this? I think it's because they're human, and they have agenda too, and we got to be safeguarding against this. Listen to what Pines has to say, my friends. At this time, there was a wise man who was called Jesus. His conduct was good, and he was known to be virtuous, and many people from among the Jews and the other nations became his disciples. Pilate condemned him to be crucified and to die, but those who had become his disciples did not abandon his discipleship. They reported that he had appeared to them 3 days after his crucifixion, and that he was alive. Accordingly, he was perhaps the Messiah, concerning whom the prophets have recounted wonders. So, the guy who wrote this, Agapius or Agapius, he eliminates the major difficulties in the standard text of Josephus, the clear additions, interpolations. This version is not reluctant to call Jesus a man. It contains no reference to Jesus' miracles. It has Pilate executing Jesus at his own discretion, not forced or the Jewish leadership being impugned for doing it. It presents Jesus' appearance after death as merely reported by the disciples and not fact. It has Josephus wondering about Jesus' messiahship, not saying yes, he was Messiah, saying perhaps. It claims only that the prophets spoke about the Messiah, whoever he might be. Not that they spoke about Jesus. Shlomo Pines, my friends, look for those scholars out there that have done their homework. There's more to the story than often meets the eye. As a, whatever, I'll just have to say hoorah to that. Anyway, conclusion to all this evidence, check it out. It amply and substantially tells us that both secular, Jewish, and Christian scholars believe that Josephus wrote something about Jesus. What's funny to me is that even if we pitch the Testimonium Flavianum, which we have no need to do, the corpora of Josephus' 80,000 lines of history corroborates the historicity of the New Testament geography, the biblical, the biographical history, the archaeology. I mean, when you see Josephus and all these references to places and people, he just meets right up with Luke. It's like he's having a handshake with Luke and saying, hey, you know what? Hoorah, same people, same places, thank you. You know, it's cool. You'd have to forge all of Josephus to rid the fact that this guy corroborates the New Testament literature. So, Mr. Armstrong, we got a couple words for you now that our listeners have been so patient. You've declared in your video that because Christians got their hands on it and forged the Testimonium Flavianum, that the whole thing has to be thrown out. But it's faulty reasoning for you to say that, because history has faulty dates. It's got mispronounced names. It's got pieces of scandalized information that were used for propaganda. But information passed down, regardless of these mistakes, doesn't make it unhistorical, make it unreliable, just makes the work of finding the truth a little harder. We got to do a little work. We got to roll up our sleeves, my friends, and find the truth. When you have two witnesses who give differing testimonies in court, you know what you do? You don't throw them out completely. You find the commonality between the two and you do some more digging. The jury says, hey, we got to look at this. You see this material here? You can check it out for yourself. It's so cool. You can go to your local university, anywhere, and just put in Josephus or other people who get aspersion cast on them and say, hey, what's really going on? You can check the books out. You can go to EBSCO-Host. Look at scholarly journals and articles. You don't have to be helpless when somebody like Mr. Armstrong says, this is blatant Christian forgery. I mean, it's just not that way, my friends. So don't be misled. We're really convinced that the bottom line is that reason should compel us to weigh the evidence and discover the truth, not to throw it away. We're convinced that looking at evidence leads to truth, not blind faith or hot air rhetoric. I mean, I've got almost 96 master's hours of learning. It's not because I just love being with books. It's that I think evidence and truth matters. Same thing with Aaron. He's finishing his degree this week. Excuse me, I put it into you. But and Neil's like over halfway done with his degree. We think evidence is important, okay? So, my friends, can I play the song for you? It's a little silly, Mr. Armstrong. I'm not sure if you're going to like it, but I know that you do compositions too, so I thought this was fair game. Scholars have a lot to say about Josephus, but you summarily excused him from the witness stand. You try to convince people who haven't read books you seem to ignore. And yes, Josephus matters a little. If we can trust him, he confirms not that Jesus existed, which is obvious, but it affirms the cool, powerful person he was. But evidence from others weighs even more. We have Matthew and Mark, Luke and John. Now we have David Flusser, Gava Vermesh, Paul Winter, Louis Feldman, Stephen Mason, Shlomo Pines. You can read these books, it's all in their lines. John L. Armstrong, you should be ashamed of yourself. We want you to apologize. You need to be careful when you dismiss matters and people that are much bigger than 8-minute videos. And so these are our requests. Remove your misleading video. Offer an apology for sloppy scholarship. Apologize for misleading people. It matters. And concede that you need to give more careful consideration to methodology and presuppositions. And you might want to consider accepting the Jesus that Josephus posited as a possible Messiah, because he changed Aaron's life, my life, Neil's life. We're going to be military chaplains. We're going to care about people. We're going to respect their differences of opinion, but we want to look at evidence, and we hope that you, our listeners, and you, Mr. Armstrong, do the same thing. And from my tradition, I say Christ's peace. Shalom to you.